The Iraqi army and the Kurdish Peshmerga have launched their much-awaited assault on the city of Mosul, held by ISIL since 2014. But with some Kurdish leaders adamant that they'll be keeping any territory they retake from the group, could the defeat of ISIL be the first step towards an independent Kurdish state and the breakup of Iraq? Earlier, I sat down to debate this with two Iraqi authorities on the subject. Abbas Khadim, author, academic and senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University, and Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman, official representative in the US for the Kurdistan Regional Government, the KRG. I began by asking Bayan whether the Kurdish demand for independence is in part a reaction to the massive post-war violence that the country has seen.
Definitely our history, and not just since 2003. But our history of being part of Iraq informs our decisions, all of our decisions. And the call for independence is partly informed by that. What have the Kurds in Iraq seen by being part of Iraq? Under the previous regimes in the early years of Iraq, Iraq had coups d'etats, revolutions, bloody transfers of power. The Kurds were marginalized and ignored. Under Saddam Hussein, we had destruction of 4,500 villages, genocide, chemical bombardment. Since 2003, we thought that this was a new era of partnership. But again, the Kurds have been marginalized for the past 2.5 years. We haven't received our budget from Baghdad. There have been many disputes. The Peshmerga have never been paid from Iraq's defense budget. There are many reasons to want more autonomy or independence.
Let me put that point to you, Abbas Khadim. Yes. You've said that the Kurdish leadership is using independence, quote, as a highly effective blackmail tool. How is Bayan and the Kurdish regional government blackmailing Iraq? Explain that.
Well, this is not a personal thing. I mean, I have all respect to the ambassador.
Institutional, but the Kurdish regional government.
And I have said that. And I also have said
But
that...
what do you mean by that?
What I mean is that every time there was a threat of independence, not really a promise of independence or even a plan of independence. It's one thing to plan something and say, I'm going to have it on this date. It's another thing to say, I will go independent every time you are being told no, or you are not given what you want. But in fairness to that statement, I believe that it's not just the Kurds, but political blackmail is the favorite mechanism all Iraqi politicians are using.
Let's deal with the Kurdish,
since
we're here for the Kurdish issue. To respond to the political blackmail point.
I agree that we Iraqis are very good at emotional and political blackmail. I wouldn't say that we're using independence or the promise or threat of independence as blackmail. It's something that needs a process, and we want to declare independence after dialogue and through peaceful means, and that means we need to engage with Baghdad. We don't want to have a war of independence, and we don't want to declare independence in such a way that it causes more instability. We want to engage in dialogue with Baghdad, with all of the parties in Baghdad. At the end of the day, whether we're part of Iraq or we're the neighbor of Iraq, Baghdad will be our biggest partner, whether it's trade, finance, maybe military pacts. We will need each other.
And let me ask you both, given that ISIL is still a deadly force in Iraq, being fought on one side by Iraqi forces, so-called Shia militias, Kurdish fighters, the Peshmerga. Would a declaration of independence, while ISIL is still around, not cause instability in the country?
It will, and because after all, independence, one big part of the independence is to set the borders between the future Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq.
Would that be easy?
And now most of the areas at the border are held by ISIS. Without having clearing these areas from ISIS, getting liberation, that will be, I think it's silly to even talk about independence, because where are you going to declare the border? A lot of the disputes that are still in the Constitution, it says that both sides have to sit and do it. So. Yeah, I mean...
There's no doubt that there will be disputes over borders. I agree with you, and those are issues that should have been resolved through the Iraqi Constitution's Article 140, which set out a mechanism for doing this. Sure. But neither the Iraqi government nor the international coalition led by the United States was interested in doing that.
Some of your critics say that you're using the fight against ISIL to quietly take territory that wouldn't otherwise be part of a Kurdish state into your borders. For example, Kirkuk, which I believe the Peshmerga took in 2014.
Really,
would that be part of a Kurdish state?
Kirkuk, we believe, is part of Kurdistan. Absolutely.
And you now control it thanks to having taken it from ISIL. Does it
Sure,
automatically become part of a
No, we need
Kurdish
to
state?
come to a power-sharing arrangement with all of the people in Kirkuk and other areas. We need to be mindful of the different people that live in Kirkuk, in Nineveh. There are Christians, Assyrians, Yazidis and others, as well as the Turkoman. There are many, many diverse groups in these disputed territories. We need to have a real power-sharing mechanism for them, and they need to be given the choice. But the choice is the key word or the key phrase.
And coming to the subject of choice, Abbas Kazim, isn't the problem that the Kurds have a choice to go independent? Maybe if the Baghdad government wasn't so allegedly corrupt, dysfunctional, incompetent, whatever you want to call it, whatever the critics say, you wouldn't have a situation where part of the country is trying to split away.
No, well, that's absolutely sure. I'm a big critic of the government in Baghdad. That's well known and it's my record. But also the corruption goes on both sides of the border. The KRG has also, the Kurdish or Kurdistan regional government has also many political problems. Indeed, as we speak, the disputes and division within the KRG is probably as big, if not bigger, than it is in Baghdad. So the Iraqi government is corrupt. It has many problems. It has not done well by the Kurds, but also the other side, the Kurdish government, has been also part of this dysfunctional arrangement.
Let me ask Bayan about the Kurdish government. One of the claims that Kurdish officials often make, part of the kind of PR effort that Kurds make abroad, that you're free and democratic, unlike a lot of other parts of that region. And yet you have a president, Masoud Barzani, whose term expired more than a year ago, who blocked the Speaker of Parliament from entering the Kurdish capital, whose nephew is the Prime Minister, whose son is the intelligence chief. Many would look at that and say, that's not a very democratic place.
We say that we're democratic, but we don't say that we're perfect, and we've never claimed that. President Barzani is the president of Kurdistan. He is recognized as such. He is the commander-in-chief, and all of the Peshmerga follow his orders and fight ISIS united. With regards to the issue of democracy, there is more democracy in Kurdistan. There is more freedom of speech. Women have a better position in society. Religious freedom is respected more in Kurdistan, I would argue, than pretty much most of the Middle East. These are things that we can build on. I've never said that we're perfect. I don't think we've ever claimed that.
Abbas, is it resentment on the part of Iraqi Arabs that the Kurds do seem to have this stronger democratic system? They seem to have a more popularity abroad. The Peshmerga are often romanticized in the Western media in the way that a lot of Iraqi militias are not. Does that bother Iraqi Arabs? Is it a resentment of the Kurds on the Iraqi Arab side?
Not at all. I think that if anything, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I'd be happy for them to have a perfect democracy and even an independent state if that's what they choose. The only thing is that the premise is problematic. I do not believe that they have that democracy to be envied. We just saw this activist caught, and his head was and eyebrows were shaved for just writing something they didn't like. So that's a problem. Journalists get killed. Yes, there is maybe some freedom of speech, but not without so many red lines that if one crosses, it might cost them their life.
But the problem is, as Bayan pointed out, relative to the rest of the region, and even relative to the government in Baghdad, the human rights situation is probably better there, is it not?
No, I don't believe it's better. I think that even inside Iraq, there are issues. Look, for years, Iraqis have been.
I think the record speaks for itself. I've never said that Kurdistan is perfect. I don't think any of us have. But I think to compare Kurdistan...
I don't think anyone's asking for perfection.
But just to compare Kurdistan to the rest of Iraq, I think is quite a remarkable statement.
It is a remarkable statement because it's true. Because if you are comparing security, it's a different question. But the question is about freedom of expression. Just compare the demonstrations that have been going in Iraq against the government. They even sacked the parliament and the Council of Ministers and and no repercussions. And compare that with the demonstrations that criticize. If you want to criticize Masoud Barzani, you have to go to Sulaimania, and it's really something remarkable.
Maybe the people of Erbil and Duhok like President Barzani.
Well, come on.
Have you ever considered that?
All of them? That's not very democratic to say you have 100% support.
I didn't say that, but the election results show that.
There have been reports of the Peshmerga committing alleged war crimes. One European diplomat who visited northern Iraq told Foreign Policy last year that he had seen, quote, the deliberate, systematic destruction of Sunni Arab property at the hands of the Peshmerga. Human Rights Watch said in a report in February that Iraqi Arab citizens in areas retaken by the Peshmerga from ISIL had been displaced, cordoned off and detained. What's your response to such
there
reports?
was a very, very detailed response, village by village response to the Human Rights Watch report that outlined what happened in every single village.
So you don't accept those findings?
On the whole, no. There were some findings, there were some places where there were negative, let's say, incidents. But on the whole, these were areas that were taken from ISIS. Either they were booby-trapped and nobody could go back, or they were in the front line. They were in the no man's land between ISIS and the Peshmerga. It would be crazy for people to go back.
Let me say this to both of you.
I'm happy to share that report with you. I think it's out there in public.
I'm sure people can see it online if they want to. We're running out of time. Very quickly before we finish, two quick questions. One is, the history of partition isn't a happy one, is it? I mean, from India and Pakistan to Palestine to Cyprus to the Balkans most recently, it does tend to lead to a lot of bloodshed when you partition a country. Are you worried about that?
The history of one Iraq hasn't been a happy one either. We have had genocide after genocide, not just one. It has been an unhappy marriage. And I think Abbas and I agree that people who want self-determination should decide for themselves. I think we're...
Do you worry, Abbas, that if the Kurds do go down the independence route, actually declare independence, the Iraqi government would turn violently against them over borders, over oil?
Well, no. The question is, again, this with a caveat, is depends on what map they want to have.
So there is a caveat.
Yes, if the map that as Kurdistan government now is presenting that goes all the way to Mendeley, I guarantee you that there will be war for it. But if the map is something that is negotiated between Baghdad and Kurdistan, definitely, first, the Kurds have every right to have that on every level, moral, political, and legal, to have a negotiated, mutually agreed upon map. And also, it is the moral obligation of Iraq, the region and the international community to help them have that and create a mutual.
Final question to you both, prediction time. Will we see an independent sovereign Kurdistan in 5 years' time or even 10 years' time, Bayan?
Yes.
5 years, no. 10 years, possible, yes.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for joining me in the arena. That's our show. Up Front will be back next week.